Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show that talks about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I hope you'll join me as I chat to everyday people with not-so-everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation over in the Let's Talk Near Death online community, which is found at www.letstalkneardeath.com. Membership is free, or you're welcome to upgrade to join the live VIP events, to gain early access to episodes, or to receive extra VIP bonus material. Your support helps me to continue to get episodes out and to help grow the conversation around these types of experiences. But before then, let's talk near death.
We had the longest hugs we probably ever had because there was a chance I wasn't going to make it through the surgery. Based on a lot of the studying that I have done, it does seem like we kind of have a life plan or a blueprint. All of them, in my opinion, in the opinion of 2,500 NDEers, basically comes down to this unconditional love.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget that you can have the full experience of the podcast show over in the Let's Talk Near Death online community, and that is at www.letstalkneardeath.com. Today, I'm chatting with Jeff Janssen, the author of the incredible book, Life Lessons from Heaven. Jeff had an extremely close brush with death when he was 42, and this event forced him to begin to question many things about his own life, about his pending death, and things like what actually happens to us when we die? Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? All of these juicy questions that often we tuck away under the carpet and we don't address while we're living here. As Jeff confronted these questions head on, not only did he come across many near-death experience stories and accounts of the afterlife, but he began to see some common themes that were coming up from these experiences and what he was researching. Today, Jeff helps others to navigate their life events, to look deeper into death, the fear of death, and to implement as many of these life lessons as possible. So Jeff Janssen, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. It is fabulous to have you here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time, so it's a real treat to actually join you on one.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to see what we talk about today. This book is amazing. I've been reading as much as I can. I can't read on a screen too well, but reading through as much as I can of it. And I highly recommend that our listeners get a hold of that. So we're going to put all the links to the book in the show notes. But Jeff, let's go back a little bit. What was going on for you? Tell us about this brush with death that you had.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, I was 42 years old, a wife and two kids, 8 and 10, and just kind of going through life and, thinking that everything was going to be fine and was going to live a long life and all that. And then I started getting what I thought was heartburn. And I had had a few bouts over maybe 2 weeks or so of what I thought was heartburn. And it was around our Halloween here in the United States. And there was a time when I was just walking up a basic hill and I felt this in my heart and I'm like, that seems strange. And then the next morning I was just carrying up an empty suitcase up some steps because I had an upcoming trip. And I thought, you know what, you better get this checked out. So I went in and talked to a nurse and she said, well, let's get you on a treadmill. So I went over on a treadmill and started running on the treadmill, and just this absolutely crushing pain in my chest, pain radiating down my left arm. And they're like, Mr. Janssen, we got to get you off this treadmill. They gave me a nitroglycerin tablet. They had me lay down and they said, you've got a pretty severe blockage. We're either going to have to do open heart surgery, or if the blockage is in a good place, we might be able to do some stents. So what I thought was just going to be, a basic kind of doctor's appointment, I was almost going into open heart surgery. So definitely changed my world around. My wife called in my two kids out from school, and we had the longest hugs we probably ever had because there was a chance I wasn't going to make it through the surgery. But fortunately, they put 2 stents in my heart, And it just got me thinking at 42 years of age, what would have actually happened to me if I had died? And, was I the person I wanted to be? I was raised and brought up Catholic. So, that stuff goes through your mind. Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Which one of those would I have gone to? And it just got me thinking in some very different ways and asking questions that honestly I had pretty much ignored. I had looked at some of this stuff, obviously going through with religious training, but for the most part wasn't focused on that until I had to be. This incident forced me to ask these really important questions.
Yeah, it's quite a common thing, isn't it? A lot of us go through life. We need that wake-up call, don't we? And it seems it's so strange that we need that wake-up call, but we're so involved in what we're doing. We're busy. We've got stuff to do. And yeah, these questions are really valid, very important questions. So what was your first question? Can you remember?
Yeah, I think the main question is actually what would have happened to me? Would I have been gone forever? Would I have gone somewhere? Did I live the kind of life? So, lots of questions. It wasn't just one, but, where would I have gone? And did the life that I had been living up to that point merit me going to one place or another? So it just, stuff that I had really ignored or thought, okay, I'll think about when I'm 60 or 65 or 70.
Yeah.
Now you're forced to think about these things. And I think that's how it goes, as you said, for a lot of people. Either you have a health scare on your own, or someone you love has a health scare, or someone you love transitions and passes, whether they're older than you, the same age as you, or sometimes even younger than you. Sometimes it's these big major life events or crises that force us to think about these things.
Definitely. And they're so important. So you went on, you started to tackle these questions head on, started to think about, well, where would I go? I imagine that quite a lot of that would have had some influence in your belief system.
Yeah, it definitely did. And as I said, I was raised Catholic and in a pretty Catholic environment. And so you had certain conceptions of heaven and hell and who gets to go to one place and who has to go to the other place. But as I'd kind of gotten older, I drifted away from the religion a little bit and just, was really not really paying attention to these afterlife or spiritual questions because frankly, I didn't have to. Things were going well in my business. Things were going well in my family. So that was my main focus. And that, as you said, probably is a lot of people's main focus of just trying to get through the day to day, keep the kids in school and doing well and helping them, keep your business going, keep your marriage going, all those things. And you don't really think about these bigger life questions, as we said, until you're forced to.
So then I understand that you went from this experience, you started to research other experiences that people had had. You started to come across near-death experiences?
I did, and I had bought Raymond Moody's Life After Life. I was a big used bookstore person. Most of my books I was getting in business world and sports world and things like that. But I had seen this, Life After Life, and thought, someday I might want to read that. I think it was like $1 or $2. It was really cheap, so I thought I'll just get that while I'm with these other ones. And then, after this event, it was like, wow, let's look at what some of these people have experienced who have died and come back. And I started reading that, and it just really fascinated me. So then, I was looking at some of the other resources that were out there. Ken Ring's Lessons from the Light is just a fabulous book where he interviewed so many near-death experiencers early on. And that really got me then looking into various near-death experiences. And ironically, the IANS conference, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, actually had their international conference in Durham, North Carolina, which is only about 30 minutes away from me. And that is where probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with Dr. Eben Alexander. That's where he actually had his first coming out party talking about his near-death experience. So it was neat that was there for me. And just after that, I'm like, wow, these people really seem to have a amazing insight into life, into death, into the afterlife. And it really resonated with me, that the answers that they found during their experiences just answered almost all the questions that I had and then some. So it just put me on this quest then of reading all these books, talking to NDEers, I've been to tons of conferences now, looking at websites and all that. And at this point now, as I said in the book, it's probably 2,500 then. The book's been out for almost a year now. It's probably at least 3,000 near-death experiences that I've read or been exposed to.
And I love how there's so many more experiences coming to light, because for so long we didn't have the internet. We didn't have ways to share about these experiences. But I know even since you wrote your book, there's so many more that have come out and said, well, I had an experience similar to this, which is very exciting. And I'm really interested, Jeff, tell us a little bit about what did you see? I know you've interviewed many experiences. You've got their stories. You've researched this quite in-depthly. That's not even a word, in some depth. And I would love to know, what are some of these themes that are coming out from your research?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that just when I read stuff, I like to organize it for myself and try to come up with what are the main things that people are saying and getting from this. And for me, it seemed to organize around 10 main things. And the first one that everybody universally mentions is the unconditional love. And they say that everything is all about love, that is what the afterlife is about. That's what this world is ideally about. That's what the universe is entirely made of. So all of it really boils down to one thing: love unconditionally. And that seems to be the main message. Love unconditionally others, love unconditionally yourself, love unconditionally the divine or source or whatever word you want to use for all that is. But this unconditional love is just the thing that trumps everything else. And I end up coming up with 9 other things, and we can talk about those as we go through here. But all of them, in my opinion, in the opinion of 2,500 NDEers, basically comes down to this unconditional love. As I said, not just for other people, but for a lot of us, we have a hard time loving ourselves. And if we can love ourselves more, it would be easier to love other people sometimes.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. And it's the thing that I've seen through doing the podcast and through the interviews that I've been doing. It always comes back to love. And often, like you've just said, that's the difficult part, especially the self-love piece. And so we're given this love and this message of it's all about love. And yet to actually learn how to love fully and love ourselves is a whole nother story. So the other parts that you've learned, the other lessons, how do they enforce the love, or how do they teach us how to love more?
Yeah, to me, all the other 9, and I'll mention them here in just a second, are all subsets or examples of unconditional love. So, one is live fearlessly. The big thing that a lot of NDEers talk about is every choice we make is either based out of love or based out of fear. And I think if you look at almost every decision you make in life, you'll see, okay, I made that choice, that decision, because I really love someone, and I did it out of love. Or you know what? I yelled at somebody because actually it was a fear that I had, and I have to look in depth at that. So one of the things that they say is to live fearlessly, that there's so many fears. Most of them we create in our own minds. They aren't really even there. But we end up fearing so many things, whether it's a job change or asking somebody out or whatever it may be in our life. So many of us never do what we came here to do because we let fear hold us hostage. So they talk about living fearlessly. Another one is working purposely, that every single one of us has at least one purpose, but oftentimes, multiple purposes. Sometimes it may be parenting. Sometimes it may be a job or a career that we do. Sometimes it might be helping a loved one through a terminal illness. But each of us has at least one specific reason for our coming down here. And I often say we have a purpose that we need to do to make the world a better place. But we also have a purpose that our soul came here to learn something. And we oftentimes have to go through some difficult things so that we can grow and develop as a soul. So it's like a purpose for helping the earth, and it's a purpose for helping us. Choose compassionately is another one. We have so many choices. And for a lot of NDEers, they have their life review where they get to see every single choice that they made and the ripple effect it had, not just immediately, but 25, 50 times down the road, across generations, across the earth, all these different things. So these are all examples of love, as you can see. Accepting others non-judgmentally, no matter what their age, their race, their sexual orientation, you name it. From what I hear from NDEers is there is no favorite that God has. We are all created equally and we are all to be accepted. And that's certainly a big part of loving unconditionally. Learning continuously. We're going to have hardships. We're going to have difficult things that happen in our life, but hopefully we can continue to love and be good during those things as well. Serving selflessly. Obviously, each of us has been given certain gifts that we can hopefully contribute to the world, and we're supposed to give those selflessly in what we do. The eighth one is accepting or appreciating regularly that we do have a lot of gifts and we do have a lot of great things on this planet, in addition to some of the challenges, but we've got to be able to appreciate those. Probably the toughest one in terms of loving unconditionally is that of forgiving fully. We have to forgive other people, and going back to loving yourself, we have to forgive ourselves a lot of times for the mistakes that we make as human beings, and it's just a part of being human. And then the last one is trusting completely. We have to be able to trust no matter what viruses are going on, no matter what challenges are going on in the world, that there is a bigger plan to all of this. And in the end, everything is going to be okay. So that's a quick rundown of all 10 that are there. But as you can see, hopefully they're all in alignment with the love that needs to be there.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? There's so much in that, Jeff. You know, I think about that. It would be quite easy to get overwhelmed by that because, like you say, it all comes back to love. But here's another 9 aspects that we should be living our life by a certain way, or trying to not necessarily achieve, but try to align ourselves with these other life lessons. How does someone not get overwhelmed by that?
It is. I mean, it's really hard. And when you go to Howard Storm and what he talks about, you know, he had his NDE, and basically he's like, okay, well, I'm going to build you, God, this big monument. I'm this artist. I can do all these amazing things. And God's basically like, you know what? All I need you to do is love the person you're with. And Howard's like, no, that's too simple. I'll do something grander. And the divine's basically like, no, love the person you are with, whether that is your spouse, whether that is your neighbor, whether that's your enemy. And I think if we can boil it down to just loving whoever you are with, that obviously is a huge challenge, especially for people that we don't always like or get along with. Yeah. But it's part of what we do. And one of the things that we've tried to do with this book and some programs that I've created as well is we do a program called Living the 10 Lessons, where first of all, we read through it and discuss it. We call that our soul peeps groups because we have certain people that just have that soul aspect to them, and we go through it there. But then after we go through the book once, we then take each chapter in each of these lessons and try to apply them for the week. And we support each other and talk about, okay, well, I'm going to ask for forgiveness from this person here, or I'm going to really try to be nice to somebody who's been a challenge. So we try to actually take a week, and then we do a little mini life review at the end of the week where we say, okay, how well did we do these things? And we do a little 1 through 10 rating, and we talk about and support that with each other. So it's a way of trying to take all these things that seem overwhelming and put them into a weekly kind of plan and program so you can actually work on it.
Oh, wow. That just sounds absolutely amazing. And I can see how much benefit that would give people who do it. Jeff, you mentioned one of the life lessons was around living with purpose, living purposefully. Do you think that we have more than one purpose?
I do. I think that we have, multiple purposes in what we do. I think it depends upon phases of our life. And, as I said, one of the purposes might be for being a parent or one of the purposes might be for being there for someone who's going through a difficult thing. So I think we do have different purposes at different points in our life. I don't think we have like 50 of them, but I do think that we probably have 2 or 3. And as I said before, I think there's a purpose that we have on this planet to make this planet a better place, or to bring the gifts that we have to help people. So I think there is an outward exterior purpose for our time here on Earth. But as I said, I think there's also an interior soul growth purpose that maybe we've got to learn patience. And we came here to be in situations where we're forced to see if we can act with patience. So I think our soul has picked 1 or 2 things that's like, yeah, you really got to work on that. And we've found situations that give us a chance to develop our soul growth purpose, in addition to contributing, hopefully, to some greater task or event in the world.
Interesting, isn't it? So then, do you think, and actually you just tapped on this in one of the sentences you said earlier about we choose something. Do you think we choose our purpose before we come? Are we given our purpose? How does it work? Do we arrive here, and what happens if we don't know what our purpose is?
Yeah, those are great questions. And again, going back to my Catholic upbringing, to even think about I was existing in some way before I was born is a totally foreign concept to some religions. It's like the only time you were actually here for me would have been April 23rd, 1969. That was the first time I was here. Now, when you talk to NDEers, yeah, they're going to say there was a time before I was incarnated, and there's certainly going to be time after I was incarnated. And based on a lot of the studying that I have done, it does seem like we kind of have a life plan or a blueprint that we, in consultation with maybe guides or the divine, kind of say, yeah, I really need to work on, as I said, patience. And let's put me into some situations and give me a trajectory and a life outline and path that's going to put things in my opportunity, or in my way in some cases, that will force me or give me the opportunity to work on patience. And I've got free will. I get to make the choice. Am I going to handle this situation with patience, or am I not? But it's going to give me the opportunity to work on these things. It's almost like selecting classes. So many near-death experiencers talk about our time on Earth like a school. And we select a major in a certain curriculum. As I said, I'm using this patience theme that, okay, I'm going to take patience 101. I'm going to take patience 301, advanced patience. And you're going to take all these courses, and life's going to throw opportunities at you where you've got to be patient. And then not only are you going to get to make those choices in your free will, but at the end of your life, you're going to have a life review. And you're going to go back and look at every single one of these situations that you had thrown at you in these courses, and you're going to get to grade yourself. How well did I do in that situation? Because you're going to get to see it not only from your perspective, you'll get to see it from the other people's perspective as they were getting frustrated because you were impatient with them. You'll get to see the ripple effects of that. You'll get to see it from everybody's perspective. So the absolute learning you will get from this time here, you will be crystal clear about how important patience was and how well you did in demonstrating that with your free will choices.
Wow. The classroom analogy is really interesting. And I do hear that quite a bit from different experiences talking about the classroom. And like you said, taking this paper over here and this one over here. When I think about school, when I think about classes, when I think about education, I possibly wasn't the greatest student. I wasn't one of the most academic people, and that's okay. But when you're talking about that, I'm thinking, what if you fail? Do you think we can fail I don't know whether you'd call it failing our purpose or our mission, but if we've come here to learn one thing, and then we're, like you said right at the beginning, we've got our head down, we're focused on we're not even aware of what we're doing, we're not confronting these big questions. Can we fail life?
The good thing about this that NDEers tell us is we have been made perfectly imperfect. So
Yay.
we are imperfect. We are human. We have egos. We have challenges. We have faults. We have idiosyncrasies. And that's a part of this human condition that we willingly take on. So we know that we're going to make mistakes. And one of the neat things that so many NDEers have talked about is when they do this life review, they learn there weren't any mistakes. There were only lessons. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind, that, okay, here's a choice. Did I make a loving-based choice or did I make a fear-based choice? And we get to see that, and then we learn, okay, well, love probably would have worked better for me, and love probably would have worked better for that other person there too. And so many people, especially if they've had a certain religious upbringing, as I mentioned, the Catholics, a lot of times they're worried about sin. And there was one gentleman, Tom Leach, who had an NDE and a Catholic upbringing with a bunch of nuns who a lot of times when they didn't do things well, he would get hit over the back of the head with a ruler. And he said he started watching his life review and looking at some of the horrible things that he had done, and he was waiting to get hit in the back of the head by this ruler. And he said the only thing that hit him in the back of the head was the thought that they told him, no, there's no punishment here. Here you are learning. You are simply learning from what works and what was loving and what wasn't loving. There is no punishment here. So hopefully for those people who have that fear of hell or of being punished in some way for their acts that they have, that takes that away. It's a lesson. And yes, you're going to feel what other people felt if you did hurt people emotionally, but it's going to teach you that, there was a more loving response that you could have made in that situation.
It's good to know that, isn't it? Because I often think about, I do this work. I often think about if I had a life review right now, if something happened to me, or if I had some kind of experience where I had to be accountable, thinking back over every little thing that I do, even in one day. There's so many decisions we make. But I love what you say. If we can just work out of love, if we can respond to things out of love, it really does take away quite a lot of that weightiness, that responsibility that we might carry, because it can be really hard.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, one of the big things that I see that after people read this book and go through some of our discussion groups, for them, that life review concept is something that it stops them before they act a lot of times or say things. It's like, okay, what would I want to feel in this situation? And instead of flying off the handle or getting really upset with somebody or saying something they regret, they kind of stop and pause and say, okay, what would I want to feel in this situation? And can I make that choice versus just reacting to a situation rather than responding to it with love? So that's one I know for me personally, that's something that I try to do more of. I'm much more conscious of the snap decisions that I once would have made. And that's what a lot of people will say too, is it kind of gets them to reflect, is this the way I want to act? Do I want to watch me acting in this way in my life review and seeing the ripple effect that it has?
Exactly. It seems like there's also a huge element of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others. Some people have told me that that's a reflection of God, that the forgiveness comes through God forgives us. Obviously, that comes down to personal beliefs and whether we believe in a God or we know what our systems are. What do you think about forgiveness, and where does God fit into this?
Yeah, a great question. One of the things that kind of shocked me at first, but now I think I've wrapped my head around it, is somebody once said, God doesn't forgive. I'm like, what? God doesn't forgive?
Whoa.
And it's like, well, God doesn't need to forgive because God never held anything against you in the first place. If there's unconditional love, there is absolutely nothing you could do that would ever cause God to need to forgive you, because that love is so unconditional that basically everything is forgiven even before it is even created. So, from that standpoint, yes, it does define what unconditional love is God doesn't ever need to forgive because the love is unconditional. God would only need to forgive if God withheld some love because of something you did. So that was kind of a radical thought, but now makes sense in my mind. But we do need to forgive ourselves, as I said. A lot of us do some human things because we're perfectly imperfect, that things we said or things that we should have done or didn't do, that we hold over ourselves for a long time and we don't forgive ourselves. But for a lot of us, we hold grudges against other people. And this unconditional love that we should be giving to everyone, love the one you're with. Well, I'm not going to love that person because they cost me $10,000. Or I'm not going to love that person because they divorced me. Or I'm not going to love that person because of whatever. So we have to forgive people to try to get back to that unconditional love. But to go back to God or the divine, there doesn't need to be forgiveness because there was never a withholding of love for the action. The love was unconditional no matter what we did or what we will do.
Right. And I can relate to that because I look at my daughter and she might do something and, she'll get really upset and beat herself up. And I'm thinking, I don't really care. It wasn't great, but I don't care. And because that unconditional love is there. And I know that's a very watered down version of the love that we would get from God, that unconditional love there. I also find it really interesting, Jeff, how you're talking about love the one you're with, just like Howard Storm said. And yet we're talking about the challenges and the life lessons that we need to learn and that purpose again. So we might have people in our life where it's really difficult to love them. And part of our lesson is to learn how to love them for our, I guess you'd call it spiritual enhancement. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Hi, Kirsty here. I hope that you're loving this interview with Jeff. I found our episode so interesting and I learnt so much through the research that Jeff has been doing. I wanted to also just acknowledge a couple of really important people to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. These are some of our super VIP subscribers who have come on and given above and beyond to ensure the running of this podcast continues. Without your help, I wouldn't be able to continue creating the episodes, and I really appreciate every one of my supporters. In particular, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Charlotte, who has been supporting the show from very early on. To Sanjay, who has given a very generous donation, and I really appreciate your input. To Stuart Peace, again, has given a generous donation, signed up as a super VIP subscriber, and also to Jess, who continues to donate and continues to keep me going behind the scenes. Your input makes such a change to the way that I can do things. I appreciate it. It helps me keep the lights on as I keep working away on the podcast and enables me to get more content and more guests. If you'd like to become a VIP super subscriber and help the show keep rolling financially, then pop on over to letstalkneardeath.com, click on the tag on the left-hand menu, and I look forward to sharing more episodes with you soon. Now, let's get back to Jeff and hear about all this juicy research that he has done.
Yeah, I think so. That there are certain people that are in our lives that I think give us these opportunities to really work on these things. And, we may curse them when they're around and wreaking their havoc and playing their mischief in our lives. But when we go back, we're actually going to be thankful for them because they gave us these opportunities to try to demonstrate some of these principles. So it is ironic that our biggest nemesis or our biggest rival in life may be our best spiritual developer, but we may not realize that until later.
Yeah, exactly. And what I find even more ironic is that we quite possibly chose that environment, chose that situation before we came here anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's so great learning about these lessons. I'd love for you to share with us, what are some of the other key things that you learned from interviewing so many experiences? Maybe not the lessons themselves. Were there some key things that were highlighted? or are they all contained within those 10 lessons?
Yeah, to me, I think all of them are going to somehow fit within those 10 lessons. That's what I tried to do, is say, okay, well, out of all these different things, what are the same themes that are occurring over and over again, that if you were to, boil all these NDEs down, these would be the main lessons that were there. So, to me, almost every NDE is probably going to emphasize one or more often multiple of these different lessons that are there.
Mm. So, Jeff, were there any things which shocked you or really stood out, or something which I guess really took your attention as you're going through this research?
Yeah, I think, probably one of them is the trusting completely. And I get into the heaven and hell thing at the end. And there are people, as you know, and as probably most of your listeners know, who have the distressing NDEs, as the researchers call them, where they have these visits. Howard Storm was one of them. Rajiv Party, in his book, I think it was Dying to Wake Up is the name of that. Both of them had elements in their NDE of what they would say is a hellish NDE. So that was one thing that I really wanted to kind of look at, because I had been taught that there is this hell and that we will be judged. And that's, another aspect of this too, that this judgment aspect that a lot of religions talk about, where, at the end of times, I'm going to send some over here and some over there. As I said, that God doesn't judge us. But when they looked at these hellish experiences, which, as most of your listeners have probably heard, very small minority of the experiences that are there. Probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with Jeff and Jody Long's site, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, and the 4,500 NDEs that are on there. They found that only 2% they would categorize as hellish or negative NDEs. But what I want to do is look at, okay, why do people have these and what's the explanation for them? And there were really three that came out. One is, for some people, when they first have that out-of-body experience, they go to what many refer to as this void, this kind of black, silent area. Some interpret that as kind of a good thing. Other people are like, oh my goodness, what is this nothingness that's there? So for them, that's kind of a scary thing. And they think that's hell. And then they go back in their bodies. They have kind of a short, shallow NDE. So for some people, this void is perceived as hell. Peter Panagore is another one who talked about his NDE. And when he did his life review, he got to re-experience all the hurt, all the pain, all the emotional trauma his words or deeds had said on somebody else. And he said for him, that was like going through hell, having to experience all those things. And then there are certain people who do have, these very kind of dark NDE experiences. Howard Storm is certainly one. And he said there's certain things I won't even talk about. It was so bad. But for a lot of them, what we find is that usually they're self-imposed, they're temporary, and they're kind of a timeout condition that people are put in knowing that they're probably going to come back, and it's going to impact them so much and kind of scare them straight into when they do come back, they're going to be that much more loving. So it isn't this, as a lot of NDE researchers say, like Jeff Long and Kevin Williams, they kind of say, okay, this hell isn't this outer imposed long-term thing, but it's a temporary thing that we impose on ourselves. And usually once you look toward the light, you will then move toward it. So it's kind of a layover, as the way I kind of look at it is, yes, some people, a small minority of people will have maybe a distressing experience, but usually it is a shorter one that they can get themselves out of it. It wasn't like the divine said, you have to go there. It's they mentally put themselves there because they believe maybe they didn't live the kind of life they wanted to, but once they started looking for the light, they found it. So I always go with Winston Churchill saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. And that would be the same thing I would say to anybody if they find themselves in a distressing NDE. If you find yourself there, keep going, look for the light. It's going to get there sooner or later.
Yeah, interesting, because I've heard the same thing as well. Have you come across any negative near-death experiences where they haven't turned positive in the end? You know, by going through, if you're in hell, keep going. They go through that and they come to a point where it is light. They come out of that negative part of the near-death experience into something more positive. And then obviously they come back to their body and then they live a little bit more purposeful life while they're here on Earth. Have you heard of ones that stay negative?
Well, I think, stay as obviously they do have to come back at some point, but I think Nancy Evans Bush has written a lot about the negative NDE where they have this dark experience. But what most people say is that even though it may not have been a positive experience, I learned so much from it that I did actually benefit from it too. And Kirsty, that's probably something that you've heard, is that each experience tends to be customized for that individual. Yes, there are certain common elements that people might have, things like the life review, certainly the out-of-body experience, sometimes the tunnel, meeting deceased relatives, meeting the divine. A lot of times those elements are there, but each person has a very customized experience that's going to best impact them. And I think even these negative ones that we're talking about, that such a small percentage of people have, it actually was designed to help them when they came back to live more lovingly. So it's kind of like Scrooge and having these ghosts of Christmas past and present and things like that visiting you. It actually helps you live in a more loving way thereafter.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings me full circle. My mind is just circling around at the moment. Full circle to, do you think that if we are pre-planning this classroom that we're in before we come here, if we're pre-planning these learning lessons and all these things that we go through during our lifetime, do you think that we pre-plan our NDE? Is that something we choose before we come here?
So what I've kind of come up with, and Nancy Rhines, who's an NDEer as well, a great friend of mine, and great book that she has, Awakenings from the Light. I think for a lot of us, it seems like this NDE, and even my experience that wasn't a spiritual NDE, but was a physical, I almost died experience, is really a reset button. That whatever trajectory we were on was not one that was going to probably achieve the purpose that we had for our time here on Earth and making our contribution, was not the trajectory that we were on that was going to help us work on the soul growth development thing that we wanted to do. And for a lot of people, that NDE or spiritually transformative experience or whatever experience that they have, a lot of times is a reset button or a just get you going in the trajectory that you had intended prior to being born. And as you know, for so many people, it is such a life-altering event that their values change, their profession changes. Unfortunately, a lot of their relationships change if there's different people in their lives that aren't on that same trajectory that they're now going on. I think it was Deborah Diamond who talked about that when you reset your mental computer from an NDE or you reboot it, it's not going from 1.0 to 2.0, it's going from 1.0 to 20.0. So it's such a radical, drastic change that you can see that is definitely a physical reset, a psychological reset, a spiritual reset, an emotional reset. You are basically a different person. And I think that's why that NDE occurs. And, some people talk about that there might be exit points or probabilities that we have. I think if we find ourselves on this wrong trajectory, that NDE is going to be a very quick waker-upper and a trajectory changer, I guess would be the way to say it.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to ask you about the exit points as well. So I'm glad you bring that up. For our listeners who might not know the concept of exit points, it's just where we have times in our life where we could exit, whether we're subconsciously aware of them. It might be a scenario. So it could be something like a near-miss accident or an illness or something where we have the opportunity for life to I guess, cease to exist for us. So we have the opportunity to leave our body, and that could be the end of us. However, if we haven't completed what we need to do, or there's more available in the lifetime, that exit point, we won't take that opportunity. So it's a concept that I think we have 5 or 7 throughout our life. I'm not sure on the actual numbers on that, but there's the idea that we have these exit points through our life that we can take should life get too difficult, or should we need a point to leave, I guess, abort the mission, abort what we're doing. So interesting that you talk about that, Jeff. What are your thoughts on multiple near-death experiences where somebody has more than one? I hear of people who have up to, I think it's up to 12 now that I've heard of, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think what happens with the NDE is that door to your spiritual side, once you have the NDE, is usually open a whole lot more than it was previously. So people are much more likely. Sometimes they say, I feel like I'm walking in 2 worlds. I've got 1 foot in this world, in this physical world, and I've got 1 foot in the afterlife world. And I don't know if that door ever fully closes. So for some people, they can kind of get back to that NDE world through meditation. Or if they do have another close death, they're already kind of half there with a foot in that world. It's very easy for them to go back there. So I would agree that if you've had your first NDE, you are much more prone to potentially having other ones down the road, just because you are now spiritually open to that. That veil that's normally there for me and for a lot of other people is much more thin for the people who've had the NDE, and they can get there a lot easier than people like myself who, just try to wonder about it and speculate about it and interview everybody who's been to that other side. And what was it like? What did you learn? How can I get better because of it?
Yeah. So how does that make you feel, Jeff? Do you feel a little bit ripped off that you got so close yet didn't have the experience?
In some ways, yes, but I think going back to my life purpose was not to have the spiritual near-death experience. My life purpose was to have the physical one, to get me to reset the life that I've had and the purpose that I was doing. And it was a good purpose. It wasn't a bad purpose or anything like that. But I think I'm being called to do something that's bigger, that's more significant, that's hopefully going to positively impact more people than what I had been doing previously. And it's a big change in my life. It's one that has taken me, they talk about NDEers take, as PMH Atwater says a lot of times, it takes NDEers at least 7, 8, sometimes longer years to fully wrap their head around, okay, what's happened to me? And the world that I thought was there is so much bigger than I thought. Same thing happened to me. It's taken me, 8 years, and I'm still working on this of shifting the person who I thought I was and the world I thought I was living in to now making contributions in different ways. And it's expanding me, and it's getting me to reevaluate what I thought was success. Now I'm focused more on significance. I'm not focused on dollar figures or advancing in my career or all that kind of stuff. I'm focused on how can I take this stuff that I've been privileged to learn about and how it's impacted me and some of my friends. How can I share these amazing principles so other people can live with more love and more purpose and more passion and more perspective and more meaning and all these things that when we have our life review, we're going to be so excited about, boy, I finally got it. I woke up, I saw what was real, life was really all about, not all the stuff that I had spent 42 years of my life climbing. That's the old saying. I spent 42 years of my life climbing the ladder, but it was up against the wrong wall. And I got to make sure it's up against the right wall. And I'm hopefully now climbing a ladder that's up against the right wall.
Oh, I love it. I have the hugest smile on my face as I'm listening to you, Jeff, because everything in me is just saying, yes, this is so good. And you got so close to that near-death experience. But I know that there's 2 sides of it. As an experiencer myself, it's not always everything's easy and it's all rainbows and butterflies afterwards. There's a lot of stuff that goes on afterwards. So I love that you're doing what you're doing. It's so important. And like you say, getting your ladder against the right thing, that we're building, we're climbing towards the right thing in life. So how are things for you now? Is your health okay now?
Yeah, fortunately, my health has been really, really good. And I'm
Fabulous.
probably taking it for granted a bit. I kind of feel like, okay, now that I've found my purpose, hopefully I'm going to be around here a while to share these messages. So I probably should be eating better than I am right now. But I'm like, you know what? I think I found what I need to do. And going back to your question from before, that's why I think I didn't have a full near-death experience, because as you said, for so many people, they're so kind of, discombobulated with it
Mm,
all. And for me, I
mm,
got close, but I still have this very practical, analytical, down to earth mind. And I think that's hopefully what my contribution is in this, is I still do have 2 feet firmly in this earth, as good or bad as that might be. But I know there's something bigger and greater out there that I'm going to keep working toward. And I think there's 95% of people out there who haven't had an NDE. And I think my job
yeah.
is to work with those 95% who are asking these bigger questions, who are going through some of these traumas physically, mentally, either themselves or other people, and showing them there is a reason for this. There is a bigger picture to these challenges that you have. And hopefully my practical groundedness to that can relate to them and take them that next step over to where they need to develop as a spirit and as a soul.
Oh, that is so perfect. Yes, everything says yes. Jeff, this has been fantastic just to hear everything that you've been researching, hearing these life lessons. Are you happy to just run through those 10 life lessons again for us?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to. So first one is love unconditionally. Second one is live fearlessly. Third one is work purposely. Fourth one is choose compassionately. Fifth one is accept non-judgmentally. Sixth one is to learn continuously. Seventh one is to serve selflessly. Eighth one is to appreciate regularly. Ninth one is to forgive fully. And number 10 is, no matter what's going on, is to trust completely that there is a plan, a purpose, no matter what your life is going through. It's all in the end going to be helpful for you, and it's all going to be okay.
Wow, I love that. I know you've got a beautiful image in your book with all of those in the image. I want to get that and put it on my wall and just look at that every single day, because it's just summed up so beautifully. And I know from all the interviews I've done, the research I've done, I can just totally, it just resounds with me. Yes, that is what we need to be focused on.
Yeah,
You're
what
holding up
I've
the most
actually done, I
image.
don't know if you can see it there, but
It's a
I
little,
put that
yeah.
image on my phone, and it's a constant reminder when I pick up my phone and get ready to probably get frustrated about something or not have the patience I'm supposed to have. That
Yeah,
little
it's on your
graphic
phone.
is a constant reminder of, you know what? Are you living those 10 lessons right now? Are you loving the person you're with?
It's so challenging, isn't it? So confronting and yet so amazing, and yes, what we need to be doing. So I love it. Tell us a little bit about your course. Your course, is that a 10-week course where you go through the lessons?
Yeah, I do. I learn so much every time. You may have heard of the group Helping Parents Heal that
Yeah.
works with parents who've had children transition. We've got 45 parents who will start with us next week, reading a chapter in the book and then
Oh,
discussing
wonderful.
it. I've also done it with women who've been in prison and they've just gotten out and they're trying to put their lives back together and figure out what's going on. And I've done it with a lot of my friends. Actually, there were 2 friends, Tammy and Kathy. When I first put this together, I was reluctant to kind of come out of the closet and say, I'm interested in near-death
Yeah.
experiences. And are you going to think I'm crazy? So they were 2 people, I call them my archangels, that basically went through the book with me. And I saw the changes, the positive changes they had in their life. One of them left a 6-figure job and said, you know what, this isn't in alignment with my purpose and what I'm
Mm.
supposed to do and be here. And she had the courage to live fearlessly and jump and make a major life change. So what's so gratifying is not only do I see these changes, hopefully positively in my life, I've seen other people, and especially these parents who've had their children transition, they now know, okay, they've gone to this absolutely amazing place. They are more than okay. They're being taken care of. This is a journey. I will see them again. This is part of my soul's development. It gives them, in this just wretched time that they're trying to understand all this stuff, some peace, some comfort, some meaning and understanding of why did this absolutely horrific tragedy have to happen, and how can I grow from it, and what can I learn from it?
Wow, your work is so important, Jeff. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing that. We'll put all the links to your website in there, to the course as well. I know that a lot of people will be very interested to go and check that out. So, Jeff, I know it's taken quite some time to pull together all of this research, and you've come in today and you've just shared a massive chunk of it for free, for nothing. And that's what you're all about, is about helping to heal the world and get people on, I guess, aligned with their purpose and on purpose, living that way. So, Jeff Janssen, thank you so, so much.
Well, my pleasure. And thank you for all the work that you put in too. I mean, bringing these messages out to the world, all corners of the world, these amazing stories, you're waking people up too. So thank you for all that you've been doing to get this important message out to so many people all across the globe.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Thank you.